Hey friends, my name is Austin. Welcome back to the channel. If you are new here, this channel is all about digging deeper and going further to better understand faith in film and everything that is in between. If that's exciting to you, you can subscribe to the channel for a new video just like this one every Friday. We do stuff like Blu-ray hauls, trilogy talks, film discussions, all sorts of stuff like that. So if that's exciting to you, make sure you subscribe so you don't miss out on any new content. So before we can jump into what would make a successful and popular Eragon adaptation, we need to talk about what didn't work about the previous one. Now, what didn't work? I think the biggest issue is it's not the budget, because at a moderate budget, and especially to today's standards, you can make a pretty good movie with a very modest budget. So it could have used a bigger budget for its time, probably because many of the CGI elements of the film didn't age very well and didn't even look very good for the time. Another big problem with the film is the director. This was their first time directing a feature film, and for something like this, they should not have picked someone who this was their first movie. The first book, as you can see back here, that is a 500-page book, and they adapted it into an hour and 46-minute movie. You do not do that successfully or well. Now, the movie did make money. I believe the budget was about 150 million, and it made, I think, 200 million, 300 million, but that's not great. So it did make money, but it's still widely considered a commercial and critical failure. It was hoped that this would be well done because it had quite a cast in it of main characters, and a lot of them over the years people have still enjoyed and say that they did a good job picking a cast. It just mostly came down to the direction and the writing and the effects and just what they tried to compress all of this down into. I don't think Eragon would have necessarily needed to be adapted into a series to be successful. I think it can be done with movies. Look what Peter Jackson did with the Lord of the Rings trilogy. But I think it would be a good option. I wouldn't completely rule it out. I think if they were going to do a series of some kind, a regular series would be ideal. But if they were going to do it as a movie, I would be all for that too, because I would love to experience this in the theaters. So, direction was one of the main issues in the current Eragon film. So what directors could we pick that would be much more ideal and fitted for this adaptation? I picked out a number of ones that I think would have been good choices, but I, again, want to remind you, this is a conversation. I want everyone who's watching this video who's very passionate about it, I'm sure, to comment down below. So first on my list would obviously be Peter Jackson. He did a great job with the Lord of the Rings series, and even with what he had to work with and what the studio made him do with the Hobbit movies, he did good. And I think if you would give him a project like this, giving him as much full possible creative control, he would knock it out of the park. He's obviously very familiar with the fantasy realm and building that world, and he did marvelously with the Middle-earth world in the Lord of the Rings and Hobbit trilogies, so I would love to see what he would do. I feel like he's the obvious answer, so I wanted to get him first and out of the way, but let's talk about another one. Another very prominent fantasy series that did very well was the Harry Potter series, and David Yates directed a lot of them. I think about half of the movies he was director of, a lot of the later ones, and I feel like he did a great job of bringing maturity to the Harry Potter series. Obviously, he had some great source material to work with, but Eragon has great source material as well. So I would love to see what he would do with another fantasy world and kind of getting to build it from the beginning. David Yates stepped in about halfway through the Harry Potter series, so I would like to see what he would do from the beginning. He directed some of my favorite movies in the Harry Potter franchise, so this will be very exciting to me. Also in the Harry Potter realm, Alfonso Cuarón directed Harry Potter and the Prisoner of Azkaban, which is often considered one of the best Harry Potter movies in the franchise. So he's another person that I would like to see. He obviously has a much wider range of movies that he's directed and been involved with. So I feel like that experience would be really cool to see him bring that to the table. And as I mentioned with David Yates, it would be cool to see him kind of visualize and put a picture to this world of Allegasia in the Eragon series. Another director I think would be a good choice would be Guillermo del Toro. He is very unique in his monster visual style, all of that world building stuff. His filmmaking is probably one of a kind, and Pan's Labyrinth jumps out at me as his probably best work. I enjoy all of his movies, but I would probably pick Pan's Labyrinth as my favorite of his, and that is so rich in its, I guess, theology of the world that he builds, of these fantastic creatures and different things that take place in the world story-wise. So I would be interested to see what he would do with this. Guillermo del Toro is also known much for what he does in the horror genre, and I think that would be an interesting thing to see him explore within this world, because if you've seen the Eragon movie, you know they freaking PG'd Eragon. If you have read the books, you know it gets very dark and very violent at times. And it is something that at the very least should have been PG-13. Definitely are, in my opinion, if you want to do it justice, just because of the nature of the content that is in these books. So with that, Guillermo del Toro, I think, would be another good choice as someone that I would be very interested to see how he would interpret these books and put them into film, or as I mentioned, a series of some kind. Now for the fun part, actors. Now, everyone had much to say about the actors and from what I was looking at. But the coolest thing, I think, is a lot of people said, for the most part, they would leave the cast the way it was. It wasn't a bad cast. It was just poor writing and poor direction that didn't really work out in the end. So you'll notice for my casting, some of them I'm just going to say, yeah, I would keep this person. Here's a couple other options, but I would probably keep this person. So let's jump right into actors. And this is one that's just plain old fun, because it'd be fun to cast your own movie, wouldn't it? We're going to start off with a tricky one. At least I had some difficult time picking someone for this. Now, I haven't seen the Eragon movie for a little while, so it's not fresh in my mind, but I feel like they probably could have picked a better actor to play Eragon. And one person that came to mind when I was doing some browsing and whatnot was Matthew Lewis. Now, you may not know the name because he's not the most popular actor in the world, but the name you would know him by is Neville Longbottom from the Harry Potter franchise. Now, he had one of my favorite arcs throughout the Harry Potter franchise, and looking at him now, I was like, I could see you in the role of Eragon. I think he would pull it off pretty well. I've seen a couple of his more recent projects since finishing in the Harry Potter franchise, and even his work in the later Harry Potter franchise, because that's what I would base his fantasy experience on. I really enjoyed it. So I would be interested to see him in the role of Eragon. Next, we have Brom. Now, Brom was played by Jeremy Irons in the movie, and I think that would be the perfect decision. I know I've heard that he deeply regretted being a part of that film, but I would hope, if, in my case, I'm going to go ahead and remake the movie, he would be willing to be a part of it if it was done well. And I think he's one of the strongest actors in the film, and I would love to see him redo the role of Brom for the film. So that's someone that I would keep from the original movie. As far as other options, I think Andy Serkis would play a pretty cool Brom. He's got tons of experience all over the place. Obviously, this is not a performance capture role, but he's done really good in live action stuff too, and I'd be really interested to see what that would look like. Next is Roran, and I think I had fun with this one because I'd probably pick one of the Hemsworth brothers, that being maybe Liam Hemsworth. I think it'd be really fun to have Chris Hemsworth in there because, as you would know in the later books, Roran becomes known as Roran Stronghammer, and come on, Roran Stronghammer, Chris Hemsworth, Thor. I think that's perfect casting right there. But I think one of the Hemsworth brothers would do pretty well. Next is Saphira, and I really liked the decision to use the voice that they did. Rachel Weisz played the original Saphira in the movie, and I really appreciated just this very feminine and maternal voice almost, because she just cares for Eragon so deeply, and I really liked that they did that. So I would keep her if we could. If not, I think that Cate Blanchett, who played Galadriel, would be an excellent decision to have her play the voice of Saphira. Arya, this is another one I've struggled a lot with. I personally would have gone with maybe someone like Emilia Clarke who is most known for the Game of Thrones franchise, which I've not watched, but I've seen clips and pieces of it, and I think she would have done a good job. And I've seen other movies that she's done, so I think she would be a good choice for the role as well. And another one that I thought, I don't think I saw this anywhere, was Elizabeth Olsen, who's most widely known for playing Scarlet Witch in the MCU movies, but I think she would play a good elf, and I would be curious to see that interpretation. Not saying it's going to be the best, but this is me fantasizing about my dream cast for the movie. Katrina is another one I had fun picking a few with. I think it could have been well done with Emma Watson from the Harry Potter movies, obviously. Maybe Sophie Turner from the X-Men movies, the more recent ones, playing Dark Phoenix, or Game of Thrones, which she's also much more well known for. But I think she'd do a good job. Or Kate Mara, I think, would be a decent option as well for Katrina. I think any of them would have done well with the character because she develops a lot, especially going into the second and third book as a character. So I'd be curious to see in the long run kind of what each of those actresses would do with the role. Ajihad is another popular character. I would have gone right to Idris Elba. He came to mind immediately. I think he would be a great choice for that role. And Galbatorix. I think Javier Bardem will be a really cool choice to play Galbatorix. I love John Malkovich, but he kind of brought a fantastical cartooniness to the character. He was a little bit over the top, in my opinion. And I think Javier Bardem would be a very grounded choice to really bring a good menace. Like, if you brought in Javier Bardem with like his No Country for Old Men kind of vibe, I think that'd be really cool to see for the character. Next, Murtagh, who was played by Garrett Hedlund in the movie, which this is another one I would say I'd keep. I think he did a decent job. But if I was to pick someone else, I think Sebastian Stan would be a really cool choice to play the role. I'm mostly thinking off of his like Winter Soldier vibes, lone wolfy typeness. I think that'd be cool to see in the character of Murtagh. There's a lot of depth and complexity to the character I think would be really well explored by someone like Sebastian Stan. So that all is who I would pick as a director. A lot of those directors I would say would do a good job in writing as well, because I did mention that the script is another big issue with the film. So I think a lot of those directors, any of them would be decent choices. Any of them would be good choices as directors, and probably decent choices as writers as well. So those are my director and actor choices for the film if I were to go ahead and pick who I would want in this remake. Do not forget, because this is the biggest part of this video, I think, is commenting below with who you would pick for being involved with this if they were to remake it as either a movie or a series of some kind. I'm excited about this one. I mentioned as before, I've never done a video like this on the channel, so it's cool to kind of theorize and fantasize about what we could do with this. Thank you for sticking around to the end of this video. If you enjoyed it, make sure you like it, make sure to subscribe, and share it with someone who you know would enjoy it just as much as you did. Next week's video is going to be another Blu-ray haul, so if you don't want to miss out on that, be sure to subscribe so you can be one of the first people to check that video out. I'll see you in the next one.